Hey folks, welcome back to GitHub Pages. This is video 3 of our workshop series. In this section of the workshop, we're going to create a layout, we're going to create an include and a data file, and then we're going to use Liquid templating language to pull it all together into our project. This will give you a better idea of how all these components in Jekyll fit together to customize your theme or even how you can build your own. We're going to keep working in the GitHub web interface, and we're going to keep working on the project that you set up in video 2. So if you haven't done that yet, you'll have to go back to video 2 and get that set up before you proceed with this video. So in the last section, we set up a basic blog using Jekyll and using the Minima theme. There's several methods to start personalizing and customizing look and feel of a theme. So the first option is theme customization options that are built in to that particular theme. You'll have to go and read the theme's documentation, often in the README, to learn about which options they've made available to you. These aren't standardized, they're going to be specific to any theme. So for example, with Minima, we have an option called Skin, which is going to change the entire color palette for the website. So you can go into config.yaml and you can add this little option where it says Minima and then 2 spaces to indent that, and skin dark. And there's a set of options that are available for skin with different colors and different color schemes. So you'll learn about that option by going over to Minima's homepage here and going into the README, and you'll learn about these different options that they make available to you that are built into that theme. The next option would be to use overriding existing theme files. So if you place a file in the same location as a file that's in your theme, the version that's in your repository is going to replace it when Jekyll builds out your site. So this requires a bit of knowledge of how the theme works and examining the file structure to understand where you can override what you want. So you would again have to go over to that theme and look at that file structure. And so for example, we might go into layouts and we want to tweak the post layout. We would create in our own repository _layouts/post.html, and we'd make our own version of that file, which would supersede the version from the theme. So that's a pretty specific way to start customizing your theme, but that is available to you. The final option would be to just add new elements and kind of build on top of the theme. So you don't have to limit yourself to just creating content in your new blog. You can easily add theme elements to just extend your project and add new features. So create new layouts, includes, or other kind of files to implement whatever you want. So that's basically what we're going to do in this section of the workshop. We're going to look at some really basic and honestly pretty silly examples, but hopefully it will give you the idea of how these different features work. The final part of that recipe is to use Liquid, and we'll talk about that a little bit after we set up all of these different files. But just to give you the preview, Liquid is going to be a language that lets us pull in variables and use functions inside of our Jekyll project. And so you're going to see these curly braces, and curly braces, maybe a name for a variable, and then closed by curly braces. Or you're going to see curly braces and a percentage sign, and then a Liquid function name, and then close that with a percentage sign and curly braces. And so you're going to see that in these files that we set up, and we'll talk about it a bit more before this video is over. So let's start out with layouts. And so layouts are really the basic building blocks of your website. They're going to provide you the template elements that surround your content that you're going to wrap your content chunks into. Typically every theme is going to start with a layout called _layouts/default.html, and that's really going to represent the very base structure of your entire site, so that every page in your site is going to go through that default layout to make sure that it's very consistent. The other layouts in your project are going to have YAML front matter, and they're probably going to have a layout assigned to them as well. And so that layout is going to actually cascade back until it reaches the default, which ensures that you're going to have a real good consistency with each of these layouts without having to repeat your code multiple times. So if we go and take a look at Minima again, we have their default layout here in layouts default.html. And it starts here with that doc type declaration that we talked about, and then this root element of HTML. We got a include that's going to bring in the head element from a different spot. We have a body tag, which is going to have everything that's displayed. And then you're going to see all these different template elements that are going to repeat on every page. So the header is going to be that nav and the top of your page that's the same on every page in the site. And then finally we have this variable called content, which is what we're pulling into this template and wrapping in these template elements. So if we look at a minimalist page layout, you're going to see that the page layout has this YAML front matter, just like the content pages that we created earlier, and it has a layout, so it has layout default. And then it has some HTML wrapped around this content variable. So our markdown is going to be injected into that content variable. It's going to be wrapped by this page layout, and then it's going to be wrapped by this default layout, and that's how we build up our site and get this really nice consistent look and feel across all of our web pages. So as you can see, the layouts are written in HTML with a little bit of liquid mixed in to give you some power in putting those together. And we can customize our layouts in our project when we're using a remote theme, in this case, by overriding an existing file, or we can just create a new one. So let's go ahead and create a new layout that we want to use in our project. And so again, this is not like a great example, and this is not how you should probably write your HTML, but we're just going to do something quick so that we get the idea of how it works. So get back over to your blog project, whatever you called it, on GitHub. And here we are in our blog where we left off in video 2. And what we're going to do is create a new file again. So I go over to the add a file, create a new file. And again, we're going to have to create a new folder. So we do underscore layouts, and then that slash, which creates that folder for us, and then we give it a file name. So we're going to call our new layout dark.html, and that's going to be our new layout file. Now, in the layout, we're going to give it some front matter, so 3 dashes, and we're going to give it the page layout. So this is going to cascade into the page layout, and then we're going to do close that front matter with 3 more dashes. And so in this layout, I'm going to add a div, which is a kind of meaningless HTML element that you use to group together content and often attach some styles to it. And so in this case, I did an inline style where I said the background is going to be black, the color of the text is going to be white, and there's going to be 25 pixels of padding around all sides of this div. So again, this is definitely not the ideal way to write your HTML, but it's going to be a good example for our use case here. And then finally, we need to have this liquid variable here, curly braces, content, curly braces, and that's a stand-in for whatever uses this layout. So if we write a blog post and we say layout dark, that blog post, that markdown is going to get rendered and stuck directly into that content variable, and then wrapped with this layout, and then wrapped up with some more layouts going forward. So I'm going to go down after I've got this content in, swing down to the commit area here, and I'm going to say create new dark layout, and press the green button to add that into our project. And so now we have dark.html in our underscore layouts folder. So just to reiterate that one more time, if we use the front matter layout dark, all of the content on that page is going to be inserted into that content variable on the dark layout. The dark layout has a layout that says page, so it's going to be inserted into the page layout. That page layout also has the layout of default, and so all of this stuff that we've already wrapped is going to get shoved into the default layout, and so each of these things cascades together to keep our template consistent across our website. Alright, so the second tool that we have at our disposal is called includes, and this is a tool, a liquid function essentially, to insert some content from another file into any of your layouts or pages in your Jekyll project. So that's really the point of this, is to enable you to create little modular chunks of code and modular chunks of content that you're going to reuse multiple times throughout the site. So a good example would be your nav bar or your header section. So we're only going to write that one time rather than having to repeat it in multiple ways. The other really good use case is if you want to create a little template for a repeating content type. You might imagine image figure that you want to have all of your images formatted in the same way, or an alert, or say a box that you're going to repeat in multiple places on the page or in your site. So if we look at, for example, this little reference box, that's an include on this site. Repeating and using it multiple times. So I wrote it one time as an include, and then I can just repeatedly use that in any page that I want, and I get that same nice consistent look and feel without having to repeat a lot of code. Another example, we might want to set up a YouTube video embed, as I use in this workshop site actually. And so we create a file called _includes a video embed.html. It's going to contain that template of HTML and then some liquid to fill in all the variables that are necessary to create that little bit of content. And then if we want to add a video embed to our page, rather than having to write out that code, we can just use the liquid code instead, and it's going to look something like this. Curly brackets and percentage sign, and then this little command called include, which is a liquid function essentially, the file name that we're going to include, and then I'm adding a variable here, the YouTube ID, which would be the ID of this theoretical video. And so that little bit of information is going to be passed into the include and can be used in that template to flesh out the elements, fill in the variables that are necessary. So that's a basic idea of what it would look like. So let's go ahead and create ourselves a new include. This example is not very useful. We're just going to create the big cat include that inserts anywhere you want a picture of a big cat, a tiger. So you're going to get back over to your repository's homepage. So I'm going to click on the name of the repository or the code, and I'm going to click add file, create new file. I'm going to do underscore includes and slash. That's going to create that folder that we don't have yet. And then we're going to say big cat.html. All right, and then inside of this include, I'm just going to actually copy in the code from the web page, and I have a little bit of liquid here where we have curly bracket, parenthesis, or percentage sign, comment. So this is a comment. Liquid's going to ignore it, and I just put it there so that I can make a note to myself about what this include actually does. And then to end that comment, there's a tag called end comment. I'm going to use a little bit of HTML. So pointy bracket img is for an image. I'm going to use some inline styles just to center up that image. The src is the location of the actual image on the web. So again, I'm gone over to Wikimedia Commons and I found an image that I could reference, and I found a direct link to that image, and so I can include it into my project without actually having to put the image anywhere in this repository. And then I'm providing an alt text about what that image actually is. So it's a face of a big tiger, and then the end of the image tag here. So that's my big cat include, you know, a really important kind of functionality that you want to add to your project. So we have that set up. It's time to get down here and commit it. And click the green button to add that to the project. Okay, so we've gone through an include, and the last thing that I want to add to the project at this point is add some data. So Jekyll has an underscore data directory, and that allows you to add data into your site at build time that can be pulled anywhere into your layouts and into your pages to create content or configure things actually. So for example, let's imagine that you have a big list of people and you want to create a directory feature on your about page. Rather than just going into the markdown and manually writing out all these people in markdown, you could actually maintain that list as a spreadsheet, put it into underscore data, and then you can use liquid to add all the people to the page using a little template. So any feature that you have on your website that's made out of repeating content would be a really good candidate to actually move into a data file. So for example, you might have image galleries, FAQs, tables, reference lists, or directories of people or things, or any kind of normal spreadsheet that you have that you want to put on the web. So Jekyll supports a whole bunch of different kinds of data formats. You can use YAML, JSON, CSVs are really the best one to work with for spreadsheets, and TSVs. So for example, we could use a workflow where we create a spreadsheet on Google Sheets, and then you can collaborate with a whole bunch of people who don't have to write any code but can just work in a spreadsheet. And then you download that spreadsheet as a CSV and you add it into your project in _data. So it's a really efficient way to create some little bits of content and put them into your site. So let's create an example CSV to add into our site just so we have something to work with. So once again, on your example blog from the homepage, you're going to add a file, create file. We're going to create this new folder called _data / creates my new folder, and then we're going to create a file name called animal .csv, or yes, animal.csv. Animals.csv, how about? All right, so into there, you're going to go ahead and just copy all of this CSV that I've already set up for you. CSV is a pretty neat format. It's a tabular format that you can open up in Excel or LibreOffice, but it's really easy to write manually. So here's my header row. So I've got name, comma, size, comma, color. So those are going to be our columns. And then each one of the rows of text here is one row of our project. And each of the columns is separated by a comma. So if you have a comma inside your content, you're going to have to quote that. So if I had whale, comma, big, and then if I put quotes around that, that's still going to be one cell because I have those quotes around it, keeping that as one cell. All right, so once you paste that data into there, you're going to go down to commit the new file, and we'll just say add new data about animals, and you're going to say click the green button to add that into the project. All right, so we've created a new layout, we've created an include, and we added some data about animals. So at this point, we're going to learn a little bit more about Liquid, and then we're going to use Liquid to pull all these new things into our project. So Liquid templating language is really at the heart of the build process for Jekyll. So it's going to help knit your website all together and pull in all these variables and modular components out of your site's complete data as is exposed by the Jekyll engine. So Liquid also includes some basic programming features such as operators, loops, and filters to let you manipulate that raw content. So there's three types of Liquid statements that are used in Jekyll. So there's objects, which are basically variables, and they're going to pull these variable values into your project, and they're enclosed by double curly braces. So you have double curly braces, and then you have something like site.title and double curly braces. So that's going to pull the title value out of your config.yaml in that example. The second type is filters, and these are added onto an object, and they're going to modify the data of that object, and you put it on with a pipe afterwards. So I have this example here where we do double curly braces, we have site title, and then we have a pipe, and then we have this function or this filter called capitalize, and then we close that with double curly braces. And so we're going to take the site title, we're going to capitalize it, and then we're going to fill in that space with that value. And then the third type is tags, and those are going to be used for adding logic, flow control, and iteration to your templates. And those ones are enclosed by a curly brace and percentage sign. So here's an example here where we have curly brace, percentage sign, and the tag is if, and then we have a condition of that if, and then we close that condition here. And then we have something that it does if that condition is true, and then we always have to end that if statement with an end if. So Liquid is going to really offer you a lot of power and flexibility to mold your website and create interesting patterns and ways of pulling everything together. And given that it's really focused on this very specific purpose, and it's a rather small language, there's only a handful of things you really need to learn, it's actually a really great language to learn about programming concepts. So it's worth taking some time to learn how some of these things work, how the iteration works, and how the flow control works. So to start using Liquid, we're going to go over again to our project, and we're going to edit our about.md to pull some of these new features in. So if you're back on your project here, and we have the about.md file here, I'm going to click on that. It brings me over to the home page for that file. You're going to see that GitHub is trying to display this file. It doesn't have any of the cool styles that it has on our actual HTML version of our site over here. So if I click on about, we'll see what it looks like right now is what it is this. And you can see that it's kind of making a mistake by putting our YAML front matter into this weird little table here. But we'll go over to that pencil here to edit the file. It's going to open up our editor, and we're going to start there working in our front matter. So the first thing we want to do is change the layout to our new dark layout. So we just go into that YAML front matter, and we have this layout value already here, and currently it says page. So I'm just going to highlight that and replace it with dark. So now we have this new layout applied to our about page. I'm going to leave that title there, but I'm going to add another value into our front matter. So I'm just going to call it example, and then just put some text in there. So whatever you want to write there. If you have a colon in it, you could quote it, but generally the strings don't need to be quoted unless there's a new line or there's a colon inside that string. And then the front matter is already closed there for me. So the first thing I want to show you is pulling in some of these variables from our site into a content page. So I'm going to upgrade this little sentence right here with a new sentence where we start using some of these Liquid variables that we have available to us. So I'm going to say this page describes the amazing, and then I'm going to use the site title, because maybe I'm going to change the site title a couple times. So I do 2 curly braces, site, that means look at the config.yaml, the base of our site. Title is a value that we wrote into config.yaml, and then I close that with some curly braces. So now when it builds, it's going to actually look onto that config.yaml, it's going to find the title value, and it's going to replace this little variable that we've written on the page with whatever that string is. I could also add my author name from the config, so we do curly braces, site.author, and then if we remember back to what our config.yaml looked like, we actually had author, and inside the author we had name and email. So we have to put another dot to grab the name. Close that with a curly bracket and period. We might, those site dot variables are coming from the config.yaml, but we also might want to use some of our front matter directly in this page. So this variables that we defined here in the front matter, we can actually grab using page. So I'm going to put curly brackets, page.example, and curly brackets, and this little variable here will end up getting replaced with the example variable that we put in our front matter. Okay, so that's using Liquid variables inside your content page. Now we have this really great include called the big cat include, and we want to pull in that picture of a big cat right into the middle of our about page. So we'll go ahead and write an include statement. So on its own line, I'm going to do curly brace, %sign, which starts our Liquid statement, and we're going to use the function include space, and we're going to give the file name of from the include folder, so big cat.html, and then we're going to do a %sign, curly brace, and it's on its own line. When this page gets built, Liquid is going to look into the includes folder, it's going to find bigcat.html. It's going to take whatever's in that and insert it here into our template to display on the final web page. So let's go ahead and commit this, our changes, to our about.md. Commit message, click the green button to add this into our project. All right, so you can see here that this markdown is rendering on GitHub's interface, and of course it's not using Jekyll at this time, so none of this stuff is actually doing anything in this visualization. It's only going to have an effect on our actual website. So we go back to the home. We're going to check and see if we got a green check. So it looks like it's done building. So if we go to About and we do a refresh, we should get our changes. And so, yeah, we do. We have this cool new layout that's dark, and we have this sentence that we wrote actually with liquid variables filled in. So I have site title, and we have site author name, and we have page example all filled in. And then we have this wonderful big cat tiger face inserted into our page. And so that's how Liquid starts working to build in content and pull things in to your content pages. So we still haven't used our data. So let's go ahead and do one more thing using that underscore data folder. So this is going to be the most complicated bit of Liquid that we're doing, and it's going to be introducing iteration over those data that we have in the underscore data folder. So get back to your about.md file and click the pencil to open up that editor one more time, and we'll just get down to the bottom of this file to add our new features, because it's really important to start displaying this animal data that we added and get it somewhere on the page. So the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to access that variable. And so when I created the, I'm going to open my project here. When I went in this data underscore file, or underscore data file, I added the file animals.csv. So the way that we're going to be able to access that bit of data in our project is to say site.data.animals. So it's the file name minus the extension. Because Jekyll supports all the different kinds of extensions, it's essentially going to take that data from the supported file types and then inject it into the system in a consistent way. So it doesn't matter if it's a CSV or JSON or anything, it's all going to be represented in the system in the same way. And so we're going to access that variable via site.data and then .animals. And then secondly, we're going to want to iterate over that CSV. So we have a CSV, we have some columns that have the values in them, and then we have rows. And so if we want to put the CSV information onto our page, most likely we're going to go row by row by row and take each row and put it into the page using some kind of template. So that's going to be a for loop. And so in Liquid, what that's going to look like is curly brace, percentage sign, and for is a Liquid command. And we're going to give it a variable that we're going to use for iteration. So I'm just going to say animal, but you could use anything that you want here. It's just going to be what we represent, one instance of the variable as we go through this loop. So I'm going to say animal, and then in site data animals, percentage sign, curly brace. So this is referencing that CSV that we have. This is saying set up a for loop, use this variable for each instance each time we go through this loop. So each row will be able to reference as animal. And then we also are going to have to end this for loop. So we're going to say curly brace, percentage sign, end for, percentage sign, curly brace. So this is going to go through our CSV row by row, one time for each row, and do something. So let's add the do something part, a little template that we want to use to add this data onto our page. And so we're going to use some markdown in this case, but we need to now access the individual column values to fill in our markdown. And we're going to do that by using dot notation like we have been to access the variables so far. And so in this loop, the row is going to be called animal because that's what we set up. And we're going to be able to access each variable, each column value by using the column name as it's set up in that data file. So we'll say the curly brace animal, that's the row, and then I want to know which column I actually want to use. So if I look back at my data file, the first column is called name. So I say animal.name to access that value from this row. And then two curly braces to close that is and then I want to say the size. So two curly braces, animal.size, two curly braces, animal, period. So if I look back, we have this value size, so we can access that at animal.size. So now we've set up a little template, and it's going to go through our whole CSV, and for each row, it's going to fill in this little template. And so at the end of this for loop, we'll actually have a list that lists out all the animals that are in our spreadsheet. So a pretty neat way to add some content to your site, and you set up these templates and then you don't have to mess with them. You just go and keep updating that data file to change the contents of it. But you know, what if we wanted to make it a little bit more complicated? We wanted to add some special formatting only to the large animals because we'd like the large animals. So conditional formatting, that's really going to be an if statement. So we have ability to do that using Liquid. So we're going to set up the same loop that we already have here, a new instance of it. And so we'll say the large animals, first I'm going to just add some markdown here. We're going to say header 2, animals are best. And then I'm going to create this new loop which highlights those large animals. So I'm just going to copy the same kind of for loop that we have up above, and I'm going to close that with an end for. So we're doing the same, we're starting out setting up the same exact loop. But now we're going to add our if statement to add our conditional formatting. So I'm going to say curly brace %, if animal size dot size 2 equal signs large %, curly brace. So that's setting up our conditional. So each time it goes through this for loop, it's going to check, is the animal or is the value in the size column large? And if it is, we're going to do whatever is behind that. And then if it's not, let's set up an else. So we'll go ahead and say curly brace %, else %, curly brace, and this will be the condition for if it's not large. And then because we opened up this if statement, we do have to close it. So we're going to do %, and if %, curly brace. Okay, so now we'll set up our little templates here for each of the options. So for my large animals, I'm going to use this little fancier bit of code. So we have a dash space to make it a bullet list, and then I want to make my large animals look really good, so I'm going to give them strong. So I'm mixing HTML and Markdown. All HTML is actually valid Markdown, so you can do this. And I'm going to give them the color using an inline style tag of the animal color. So I'm going to pull in this last column here and use it to color the text of the large animals. And then I have to close that strong tag there. But if the animals aren't large, what do we want it to look like? So I'm going to make it small because I want to emphasize that they're not large animals. So I'm again going to use some HTML mixed into my Markdown, and I'm going to give the animal's name. I'm not going to color it because they're not large animals, and then I'm going to close that small. The if block is ended by end if, and then that for loop is ended by end for. So you want to make sure that you're closing off all of your statements If you don't close them off, that's a sure way to make Jekyll break, and you're going to get those red X's that your build was unsuccessful, and you're going to have to go back into your code and try to figure out where it's going wrong. So that's using conditionals, using an if statement inside of your for loop, and you could use an if statement anywhere else too to make this conditional formatting available in your project. Finally, we might want to make a list of only the small animals, and so a good way of doing that is to use the where filter. So I'm going to create another section here. So the where filter is a filter that will make a subset of your data based on some condition that you give it. So Liquid has a lot of options, a lot of filters that will allow you to transform and manipulate your data using the filters. And so making a subset is a really common use case, and it's going to be more efficient than if we just set up a if statement to do that, and it's going to give you some more flexibility. So in this example, we only want the list of small animals. So first we're going to set up a new object, essentially create a new variable on this page using the Liquid tag called assign. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we're going to use that same data again, but this time, rather than just putting it directly into that for loop, we're going to create a variable that's the subset of that data instead. So I'm going to start with this tag curly brace percentage sign, and then this Liquid called assign, which is set up a variable. So my new variable is going to be called small animals, and it's going to equal site data animals. So that's the same data, the full CSV that we've been using for these other iterations. But this time I'm going to use pipe to add a new filter, and I'm going to use the filter called the where, and I'm going to give a condition. So I'm going to say in the size column, only give me the ones where it's small. So it's going to go ahead and look through this column of size, and everywhere where the animal is small, those are the ones that are going to be included in this new variable. So now we can set up a new loop that is working only on, that's going to show only those small animals. So for animals, or animal in small underscore animals. So we set up a new for loop using this variable, small animals, that we just set up right here. So you don't have to use site data animals in your for loop. You can use a variable that you set up on the page. And then we're just going to put the template for how we want to display these small animal names. So we're just going to say curly brace animal name, and let's just make them uppercase. So I'm going to do pipe. Uppercase is a Liquid filter that will just make it all uppercase, and two curly braces, and that's the end of that little template. So we close that for loop with an end for. Okay, so we subsetted our data, we put it into a for loop, and used this template to put these list of small animals onto our page. So there was a lot going on in there. We covered a whole bunch of little parts of Liquid, a for loop, accessing some data, accessing the data from our CSV file, and using where to subset that data. So a lot of really cool things that we've already learned about Liquid, and there's a lot more neat little functionality that you can put these functions together and do a lot of advanced things. So let's go ahead and add this into our project. So your commit message, click the green button to add this in. All right, and we're going to go back to the home page, take a look for that green check of when it's done. And the one thing I want to point out about Liquid before we finish this off is that there's some Liquid documentation on Jekyll's website, and there's a Liquid documentation here from Spotify, and there's even more Liquid documentation from Spotify because there's slightly different versions. Jekyll has implemented some enhancements to Liquid that are standard only to Liquid, or they're standard only to Jekyll, And Shopify has created this open source project Liquid that is used by a bunch of other people, but their version is also enhanced, that is used to manage websites that you buy through their platform. So there's a little bit of confusion sometimes in trying to look up exactly what works. So I would stick to the Liquid docs on Jekyll, although they're a little bit incomplete, but it gives you a really good idea of what kind of enhancements Jekyll has done for using Liquid in your project. So if I go back and take a look at my commits, we'll see how far we've come in this workshop already. And so we started here today, and we've gotten all the way to here, and I've got a green check, so that means my about page should have been rebuilt. So if I jump over to my about page and I do a refresh, we're going to see all this new content that we've added. So I added first just a list of all the animals. So it went through that CSV, it filled it in using that template that we set up, and made a new list of all the animals. Then I made that second list where we put a conditional formatting on the large animals only. And so you can see that these ones are smaller, and then my large animals have their color, the whale and the elephant and the tiger, and they're a little bit bigger and they're bold. So cool. And then finally, we had a list of the small animals only, where we use that where statement to subset our data, and then we used a filter uppercase to make it uppercase in the display of that list. So wow, this is a great about page. I think people are really going to enjoy it. So play around with your project, just test these things out, and you can break your site. Those are all really good ways to learn, and go ahead and enjoy having your new blog and messing around with it, and create some more test examples, and you can always go ahead and delete them. I'll show you that quickly on the settings. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to find the area where you can delete this if you get sick of your example project. So thank you for tuning in for the first 3 videos. There's going to be a 4th video that you can tune into that's going to cover actually doing the same sort of project, except doing it on your local machine with Jekyll installed, and what that workflow looks like. So I hope to catch you there, and thank you for tuning in.